Hey, welcome to Mineral Talks Live, the weekly live webinar that brings you in-depth and in-person interviews with the mineral people from around the world. Mineral Talks Live is brought to you by a joint effort among the Mineralogical and Geological Museum at Harvard University, the Society of Mineral Museum Professionals, and BlueCap Productions. Tune in every Wednesday and stay connected to your mineral world. Now, broadcasting live from beautiful Honolulu, Hawaii, the land of aloha, ukuleles, and shakas, this is Mineral Talks Live. Hello, a hearty welcome to all of you. Today is Wednesday, April 14th, 2021, and this is our 43rd episode of Mineral Talks Live. Mineral Talks Live is the weekly mineral talk show broadcasting to you live every Wednesday. I'm Brian Swoboda, the president of BlueCap Productions, and together with my truly exceptional partners, Dr. Raquel Alonso Perez from the Mineralogical and Geological Museum at Harvard University, and Dr. Eloise Gaillou from the Society of Mineral Museum Professionals, also known as the SMMP. We want to welcome you to the show and invite you to come back every week. Our goal in producing this program is to focus on bringing together all the different facets of our mineral world, from curatrix and curators to collectors, dealers, miners, researchers, artists, and the media that serves us all. We hope that in doing so, we show how our audience is so diverse in this mineral world, and we really want to allow everyone to get a better perspective of what others do in this world. As an audience, we invite you to participate with us and with each other throughout the live show. There are two ways in which you can do this, and both are located at the bottom of your screen in the form of buttons you'll see in your Zoom application interface. The chat feature allows you to type messages to everyone watching and participating in the show. So when you first sign on, feel free to fire off a chat message to everyone telling us where you're from. If you have thoughts or comments, this is where you can post them. Now, during the interview, my guests and I may not see all your chat messages, but both Raquel and Eloise will be very active in those chats, so look for their comments and links. When appropriate, either Raquel or Eloise may address us directly with some of your questions, so go ahead and participate there. Now, the second way to interact is with the Q&A function. This allows you to submit general questions that we'll try to answer at the very end of the interview. Finally, at about 40 minutes into the program, you may see a window pop up on the screen asking a bunch of questions for our weekly poll. This is one of our favorite parts of the show, as it allows us to learn small, random, and oftentimes interesting little facts about our guests. And speaking of guests, today's guest has really been kind of the driving the boat for one of the oldest mineral-related societies in America. He was the executive director of the Mineralogical Society of America from 1995 to 2020, during which time some enormous leaps and bounds were made with the MSA, which we'll learn about shortly. He now serves as the senior fellow of the MSA as the organization continues to advocate for the advance of mineralogy, crystallography, geochemistry, petrology, and the promotion of their uses in other sciences, industry, and the arts. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Alex Speer to our show. Hi, Alex. How you doing today?
Doing fine, Brian. We appreciate the invite for something that potentially could be very dull, but we appreciate it.
Not dull at all, buddy. I mean, really happy that you can be here. How's the weather out? Where are you based right now? In Virginia, correct?
Correct. Chantilly, Virginia. The office is right at the southern end of the Dulles Airport runways.
Fantastic. Now, Alex, I know that you're a longtime and loyal viewer of Mineral Talks Live, so you know that I always like to turn back the clock on our guests. You're a geologist, and at some point in your life, there must have been some first encounter with a mineral that set you off in that direction. Tell us about that.
Well, perhaps it started when in 8th grade, we were asked to make a presentation in science class, so I had to decide what to do. So I decided I would talk about or make a presentation about a quartz crystal I had found in a strawberry field in a truck farm that was a neighbor right next door. So that's what I did. My information relied on the Golden Book, Rocks and Minerals book. So it was obviously relatively successful. For college, I looked at several schools who had geology programs, thinking it might be a good thing to pursue. Only one decided they would accept me, so that was Franklin and Marshall in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So when I went there, one of the first courses I took was then John Moss's Introduction to Geology, and that was pretty much set at that point.
Well, fantastic. Now, what was it about that quartz crystal that got you feeling that you wanted to make a presentation about it? I mean, do you remember what your thoughts were when you first saw it in the strawberry field?
Well, it was just shiny because I would go and take a look or see what's in the field after a rain. And so you just saw this little sort of shiny thing. And so it wasn't glass, so I picked it up. And of course, it was smoky. So it was just something quite different. And I actually have it.
Oh, do you have it with you right? Oh, no way. That is superb. I love the fact that you still have that, Alex.
It's banged up a bit because it was in fields that got rototilled often.
Hey, Alex, we're all banged up a bit, so that's fine. Okay, so you started studying geology, and no doubt you learned a lot of important lessons from your study of geology. Can you share some of those with us?
And slowly over time, I realized that it helped me understand that things or events or whatever are just part of a continuum. Okay. A lot of people tend to view a thing or a process or an event isolated as if it just sprung up right there. That's it. It had no beginning, no end. That's it. It's just there. So that was one thing that really helped. In seeing those connections, as I said, mainly makes it easy to be able to understand things, able to make at least some predictions. And if something goes wrong, you have a better understanding of how it fits into a bigger picture. It also makes it easier to remember things. Now, that's the type of thing that comes naturally eventually to geologists, but it really hit home when I began to work in industry and you work with engineers. And in that case, they too tend to view things as it is right there, that it has no history and nothing. It's just right there, period.
So, by understanding geology and its interconnectedness, I know you were doing failure analysis in the industry. How did that translate into becoming kind of an industry expert?
Well, there's several examples, but one maybe I'll do is we built rotating electrical connectors. And we had built some for the Galileo spacecraft. And the Galileo spacecraft had a section of it that rotated, and that keeps the spacecraft stable. And so they had ordered some slip rings for that, and they were testing them, and there was intermittent noise in them. So they didn't want to send uncertain electrical products on a multi-billion-dollar project for any years if they knew more about it. So anyway, I was invited out to the JPL to take a look. And when I got there, they spent most of the day telling me about all sorts of things, what their thoughts are, what their theories were, that sort of thing. When I got in there, I said, gee, I'd like to take a look at these things. But they went through all the rigmarole. Eventually, late in the afternoon, they says, okay, we'll let you see them. And they had set up a telescope to see them because these were in triple bell jar high vacuum. They were going to test them in deep space conditions.
Okay.
And so when I looked through the telescope, the silver rings had brown film on them. And I looked, and I asked them, what's the brown film on it? Well, first of all, they never took a look at the slip rings. So they had never seen it. And I asked, well, what happened to the slip ring? What happened to the slip ring after it left the plant? And they didn't know. But anyway, at that point, the meeting dissolved into sort of nothingness. And so we all left. A couple months later, I got a report back that, well, what they did is they were shipping these devices back and forth between Southern Arizona and JPL. And at times these things sat out on the loading dock, and for whatever reason, they put them in plastic containers. They were described as plastic mayonnaise jars. And then they realized, looking at the whole process, that the plastic was outgassed and depositing on the rings, and then obviously causing the brown film. So we did get another order to build them. They also got people to go out to make sure they installed them cleanly. And obviously Galileo spacecraft went to Jupiter and was very successful for 8 or 9 years. And eventually, of course, they crashed the Galileo into Jupiter itself. So some of the material we work on now is part of Jupiter. But anyway, just seeing that, it's just not a very isolated thing, that you have to look at the entire history. It's very important for understanding something.
So you're studying geology, which taught you that kind of that global perspective, that everything is connected, really kind of helped you in this kind of situation.
Yes. I mean, it was just quite revealing to talk to engineers who, as I said, just had a very narrow focus on some problem or some issue.
Now, I got a picture of a young gentleman right here that I'm pulling up on my screen. Looks maybe your son. Who is this? What's going on here?
That's me atop a Boeing wind turbine on the north shores of Oahu. My one and only trip to Hawaii, and that's the only picture to show that I was there. Those blades
have to come back
are 300 feet in diameter, and the nacelle, which I'm poking up out of, is 250 feet off the ground. It was interesting getting up there. They used a little device they use for outside window washing. But what was interesting about that is, in order to save money, they asked for a sliding electrical contact that was not housed nor protected. So it was just open to the air. And the nacelles, of course, were open to the air, and you have those nice sea breezes coming in from the ocean.
Absolutely.
Bringing all sorts of ocean mists and salts. Well, what it did is it precipitated all these wonderful evaporite deposits on the ring. And that's what was causing the shorting and arcing and that sort of thing. So, as I pointed out to you, if you look very closely, there's a leather lantern around my neck. You always go out in the field with the hand lens. Although in this case, you do not need the hand lens to see the corrosion problem. So.
Sure.
But that's myself in Hawaii in the late 80s.
When was that? Late 80s? Okay. All right. So, Alex, how did you go from geology? And I understand how the disciplines taught to you in geology applied to industry, but what I don't know is the link between it. And I'm off script right now, so I hope Alex doesn't get too nervous. But what is the link where you were studying geology and then you did that transition into industry?
Well, I was working as a postdoc still at VPI. We were working on a geothermal project, and it was coming to an end. But over the years, I had rented a basement apartment of the general manager of the company that made the slip rings. And occasionally he would talk about some problem or something they were doing. And you could know that, or you could investigate it if you used a microscope, or if you used a electron microprobe, or a scanning electron microscope, or even a thin section, a petrographic thin section. And eventually they ran into a very serious problem with the rotating electrical joint of the slip ring for an inertial guidance system. And it turns out these things were all gold. And the plant itself grew them, so it didn't manufacture them, it actually electroformed them. And they were developing silver sulfide films on everything. And when he told me that, I said, well, and he showed me one. I said, well, this is what you could do with it. So basically, we made poly sections and thin sections of it, studied it like you would a rock, We used electron microprobe to identify, turns out the black stuff was silver sulfide, argentite, which, as it turns out, creeps over gold very readily. And so it was keeping out of the interior up over the gold onto the gold surface. And it turns out the problem was that some of the cleaning and plating solutions had gotten down into it and attacked the silver plate on the copper wires, formed a little ore deposits of silver sulfides that then migrated up over the gold. So that's how it came in. And of course, when the geothermal project ended, I was offered a job to troubleshoot various problems.
I love it. So it's almost kind of by divine happenstance that you made that transition kind of more into industry.
Yeah. It's one of those unexpected results in the world. So,
well, I think it's interesting because it seems almost to be a theme that's repeating itself. Because in 1994, you were told of an opening in a sleepy little organization called the Mineralogical Society of America, and it was described as being a job that wouldn't be very demanding of you. And you took that position, and you played an instrumental role in shaping the society that we know of about today, the MSA. Tell us a little bit about this and how you evolved it.
Well, the person who called me was Paul Ribby, who was past president of it. And at the time, yes, it was relatively small. Basically, what it did is it had a few awards, and it published a journal 6 times a year. And that was pretty much it. When I took the job and arrived, there was only one computer there, which was a very old style one. The driver memory of it was a VCR tape. So that was the only thing they could recall that amount of memory. So it took about a year or two to sort of figure out everything that was going on. But about that time, of course, is when computers began to become very important. There was no internet yet, but anyway, we sort of began to evolve into doing more and more on computers. But then the internet did start, and that was probably the main driving force of, let's say, making a lot of changes. Not only the office operation, but also publishing. I mean, MSA is largely a publisher and always has been, journal and starting with books and things like that. The other thing that, of course, doing it electronically helped is it drove down the cost quite a bit. A lot of times MSA wasn't doing certain things because the cost of actually producing a print version or something like that would be prohibitively expensive.
Sure.
So that's basically what was really a driving force. And of course, you have your members who are also becoming computer literate as well. And so they were also having increased demands or requirements as well. So it was just sort of a synergistic sort of thing. The other thing, of course, it did was to try to consolidate a lot of the operations. When I arrived on the second day, I was in the office. Well, 2 things happened. One is the auditor appeared wanting to do the audit for the previous year. The other is that was, oh, by the way, the lease is up in 6 months. So anyway, trying to consolidate things because we had the office downtown, the editorial office was in Ann Arbor, and I don't know how innumerable sort of U-Haul facilities around town were storing the books. So we wanted to sort of consolidate everything.
So now when you joined, you said that MSA was just doing the journal, I think you said, as its main publication. Now it does numerous journals. You have, or numerous publications, rather. You have the journal, elements, reviews, textbooks. Tell us a little bit about that.
Actually, you might sort of take the tour.
Okay.
Because we do have some of the things that.
All right. Well, Alex, before we get up and wander around, why don't we talk a little bit about the history of MSA? We'll get through that real briefly, and then we'll take the tour. We'll look at the publications and the different displays that you have.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I think I gave slide number 1.
Yeah, let me pull it up on the screen.
There we go. Actually, there are two beginning stories here. One is for the society, one is for the journal. Discussion about forming a North American mineralogy organization of North American mineralogists started in 1913. And it was largely done in GSA when folks would get together. And it was taken up seriously by Edward Krauss in 1916 at the GSA meeting. And so early in 1917, he sent out a survey or an inquiry, which is the nice pressed letter on the left. And he asked about people's interest in forming a society in order to promote and let their science be known. And he also thought it would be very important to have a dignified medium of publication, as he wrote there. It was reported at the time, if you read some of the letters here, is that the GSA Bulletin editor reportedly said he didn't want any of that mineralogy, crystallography junk in the MSA Bulletin. So they're out on their own. The other thing you have to remember is by 1917, the U.S. had been cut off from Europe for at least 2 or 3 years. And that's where they got most of their publications, where they had their publications, where they interacted with colleagues and all that related to North America. So that was also a background of it. They really did want to focus on the publications, and the assumption seemed to be that they would continue to meet at GSA. Now, he got his results back in March and was thinking about what to do next. But then, of course, U.S. entered the war in April, I think, of that year. So with entry of the U.S. into the war, you get the note on the right there that says, well, on account of unsettled conditions at present, it's thought to hold the whole matter in abeyance. So anyway, nothing much happened until we go to slide 2. Now, the armistice was November 11th, and Krauss restarted his efforts about a North American organization of mineralogists in that fall of that year. And he started to talk to a number of people to remind them that they expressed interest, that sort of thing. And so for the GSA meeting in 1919 in Boston, they were going to have a meeting to organize. And that's what's on the left there. That's the notice that appeared in the Science magazine in November 28th, 1919. And they did have their meeting. Now, it says was going to be in the Hotel Copley, but it turns out it was at the Harvard Mineral Museum, where they met for the organizational meeting. And the report of it in the American Mineralogist shortly after on the right there shows that, yes, that's where they met. So they decided to form the organization. And then the next day is when the first council meeting happened. So everything happened relatively quickly. Now, the one thing that you may note on the science thing, it says the Crystallographical and Mineralogical Society of America. That was actually Krauss's preferred name for the society. Yeah, but you have to remember, Krauss was a morphological crystallographer. So that's why he was favored that particular name. But the correspondence that was going on in that fall, you had the petrologists wanting petrology in there. But some eventually they decided, when they got a letter from someone who said, well, they would refuse to join the Colloidal Society of America. So they decided to something very simple was probably the best way to go.
Well, I think it's obvious that nobody said that name 5 times fast out loud.
Yes. Anyway, if we go on to the next slide.
The founders.
Yes. As I said, there are two beginning stories. The other one is the journal, the American Mineralogist. The discussions also started in 1913 about forming a journal because to fill the void left by the cessation of publication of the Mineral Collector, which had stopped being published in 1899. And the main motivator behind this was Sam Gordon, who's the fellow on the left there. And he talked to some of his friends. They were all centered in Philadelphia. So he talked to Harry Trudeau and Edgar Wary, and they talked in conversation about starting a journal. And as I understand it, based on correspondence we have here, it took places in the Trudell College or cottage that was in the Pine Barrens in New Jersey. And so that's the picture there in the center of actually Harry Trudeau in the 1960s standing outside the cottage. The painting on the left is actually the cottage that was presented to the society at its 50th anniversary.
Cool.
I've tried to track down the painting, but apparently it was last seen when a lot of the material for MSA was at the Smithsonian, but it hasn't been seen since. But anyway, they had a very interesting business model. They were going to rely on the larger mineralogical organizations at the time to largely be their basically club newsletter. And you only had three of them: the New York Mineralogical Club, the Philadelphia Mineralogical Society, and the Mineral Collectors Society or Association, which is a little bit more national group. The other thing that was very important was, as it turns out, cash donations from wealthy collectors. Roebling was one, and I believe the person who gave all the gold collection to Harvard also always chipped in money. So it was supported by the clubs as well as some wealthy folks. And the first issue appeared in July of 1916. I would point out at that time, Sam Gordon was 19 years old. And he had been the main mover behind this. So you have to think about, what were you doing when you were 19?
I was drinking homemade beer.
Anyway,
I think one interesting and often overlooked fact here about Samuel Gordon is that hairdo that he's sporting was actually all the rage in Boston at the time, and it became known as the Gordon. People from all over would come into the barbershops and ask for a Gordon. So a little piece of trivia there.
Well, the other thing you might notice there is Gordon had a mineral named after him, Gordon Knight. The other two did not. But I put some names there. They have actually had plants named after them because the other big thing they were really into, particularly later in life, was botany. And so they had some species named after them.
But I mean, back in the time, wasn't it more popular to have kind of a more global, natural view of the world? So a lot of times the people involved with minerals were also involved with botany?
Yes, they were considered themselves naturalists.
Naturalists, yes.
Yeah. One thing I might point out, as I said, Wary lived a long time, and I believe that I actually met him, though I did not know at the time, in the probably in the late 60s.
Wow.
He came to listen to a talk I was giving. Anyway, shortly after that got started is George Kuntz suggested that they have a special issue for Hayes' 175th birthday, which they did do. And that was an issue that really brought international attention to the American mineralogist. I would also comment that if you look at the letters and correspondence, the journal always had financial problems, and they really didn't appreciate how much work a journal was. Anyway, if we go on to number 4 there. So the mineralogists have been being published for a couple of years when they got together again to decide to start MSA. And Wary and Krauss had a lot of correspondence, almost letters every day back and forth for about the late summer to the winter of 1919. And in one letter, which I have there on the left, the September 28th letter, is where Wary offers to combine the journal with whatever MSA publication it was to be. And the letter, the more tanner letter under there, the more faded letter from Krauss to Wary. After he consulted with some people, he said, yes, we would really like that sort of thing. Krauss was always very cagey about the publication, I think for 2 reasons, because every time he was asked about it specifically, he would always sort of hem and haw and not say very much to people. He says, well, we'll worry about that later. So this came up as an opportunity for him quite a bit. I think the reason he was so hesitant is I don't think he knew how to start or publish a journal. The other is he thought it was going to be very expensive. And we won't go back to the previous slide, but if you noticed on the letter that originally went out is they were proposing dues of $10 a year for dues for the MSA. That works out to about $205 in today's money. And that was pointed out at the time. This is hugely expensive. So I think that's why he sort of backed off on this. But anyway, the offer was appreciated. He still didn't force it, but what they did do at the organizational meeting, talk about it apparently. And when the council met the next day, December 31st, 1919, they accepted the gift to the American mineralogists. There had been talk about changing the title of it, but the owners, Wary, Trudeau, and Gordon, said, no, it has to be the American mineralogists. But Wary offered to make a subheading there, is the Journal of the Mineralogical Society of America. And that was the masthead until 2002. So
good. And Alex, I'm going to interrupt you for a second just to let the audience know that there is a little bit of audio interference that's coming from Alex's connection there. There's nothing we can do about it. That's just what happens on live shows sometimes. So please bear with us. And if you listen real closely, you can still understand what Alex is saying. It may not come in so clear all the time, but it's not on your side, viewers. It's just part of the system. So Alex, sorry for the interruption. Go ahead.
That's okay. Where we realized that there would be a fair number of technical articles now received, as well as the popular articles. But he agreed to continue editor for 2 more years in order to smooth the transition. And then after the 2 years, Krauss induced one of his younger colleagues, Walter Hunt, to be editor. And he remained editor for the next 35 years. But over time, of course, the technical articles tended to crowd out the popular ones, which was widely noticed. And of course, that's what led Peter Zodak in 1926 to start Rocks and Minerals.
That's fantastic. There is a shared origin there. That's incredible.
Well, it's not the first publication that MSA sort of caused to be formed like that.
Right.
Anyway, as I said, we'll take a little tour around the room. The next 75 years, of course, lots of little things happened. I've been working on a history of MSA, and so I have over 100 pages of stuff already.
Alex, we only have an hour.
Though, I know. The society did continue to grow, even through the Depression. And it sort of tapered off a little during World War II, and then really took off after World War II and reached its height during the Cold War. So reached about 2,700. And then since then, after the Cold War, it sort of settled back to over many years now and sort of flat about 2,000 members. One thing that's quite different about MSA, even at the start, is it always a fair number of overseas members. Even in 1930s, it had about 20%. And if you compare other societies, let's say like GSA, that would have been sort of quite different. So,
what is the percentage now? Do you have that information?
It's just over 50%.
50% overseas members.
Yes.
That's incredible. That's fantastic.
Oh.
I mean, it harkens back to kind of the origin. You were saying that so much information was coming over from Europe prior to World War I. And with the start of World War I, that kind of interrupted that communication flow. But I love to see that you still have 50% of your members that are still overseas. That's incredible. That's great. Now, your membership is different from the number of people who are reading some of your articles, because I know a lot of the stuff that you have is online right now, correct?
Correct. One thing I'll point out about the journal, American Mineralogist, everything from volume 1, number 1, up to the end of 1999 is online for free. So it's available to anyone. After that, of course, you have to be a member. But if you become a member, then you get access to the entire run of the journal, entire run of elements, that sort of thing. So,
and it's wonderful. They're all available. I checked the website yesterday. They're all available as PDFs, so you can view those, and they're wonderful scans, very clear, very easy to read, great informational library online. And what are the membership fees?
The member is $85. Mm-hmm. The student is $20.
Oh,
and there is a senior membership for what, 40 when you get old and retired.
Fantastic.
Well, ready for the tour?
Yeah. I was going to say, let's take a look around. And Raquel, if you want to launch the poll, this might be a good time as we're kind of moving the camera about. And Anne, if that is up on the window, you can go ahead and close it. Don't close the interface, but you can certainly close that message window.
Okay.
There we go.
All right.
One of the newer publications is Elements Magazine. It's now 16 years old. Each issue,
your audio is so much better right now, Alex. That's great.
Each issue centers on a theme, and there's like 4 or 5 articles that are geared to an undergraduate, graduate level, or somebody who's outside, who's knowledgeable, but that's not their thing. It was proposed by a former president, when he was president, Rod Ewing, and he thought that, a good way to get your newsletter read is having material in there that people want to read. So this is what he proposed. It became clear that MSA could not afford to do it on its own, so it had to be a cooperative effort. So he went around and talked to other societies about joining in the effort, had to convince them to give up their newsletter in order to join that sort of thing. And he once told me that he was always going around looking for somebody to tell that who would say to him no. But he says he never found that person. So now this is the cooperative effort among 18 societies. And it's actually fairly popular.
Now, excuse me, Alex, is that 18 international societies or is that 18 domestic societies?
18 international, largely.
Wow.
So you have the Mineralogical Association of Canada, European Mineralogical Union, the French Society, the German Society, the Spanish Society, the Italians, the British, as well as a number of geochemical societies.
Fantastic.
When it started, everyone assumed that, there'll be only about 3,000 or 4,000 people because, everybody's going to be joined to all the other societies. Well, turns out seems crystallographers and mineralogists, geochemists are not joiners. So now the last run that we sent out, which was the February 2021 issue, went out to 15,000 subscribers. That's members, mostly members, and about 2,000 or so institutions.
That, for the mineral world, that is an enormous circulation. 15,000 is a huge number.
You know, and you hear about it when people can't get on it. And it's also online. So all these folks have access to the entire run for the entire 16 years, that sort of thing. And I suspect that it is widely used as the basis for a lot of seminars and faculty lectures. Now, generally, most of the stuff is fairly, let's say, technical, but there are probably things that the audience would probably find useful. Of course, we have your goal article. And, of course, presumably one of your future speakers, Mark Dutrow, on tourmaline.
Yes.
We have appetite. And there was also an issue on the mineralogy of motors, that sort of thing. So, but anyway, so there are some popular topics, whatever, but it seems to be very well accepted. So that's it. And it's still the same format, a couple of articles, as well as each society has a page or two for their society news. And so it really allows all the societies to have what they're doing given to a much larger audience than just your own members.
Absolutely.
So,
now, Alex, we're kind of 45 minutes into our show, so I wonder if you can talk real briefly about some of the other publications, real short thing about the workshops that you do, the lecture programs, the awards, the grants, and then let's look at some of the displays.
Okay. The next one, of course, the very popular one is the reviews. Began back in 1974. Again, it was proposed by one of the former presidents, Paul Ribby. They had done a short course with AGI, just a little simple sort of thing like this, and it was very popular. So he suggested that why don't we have something like that that would review topics in mineralogy. And what's more important is he had the proposal and he says, I'll do it. And so from 1974 to 2002, he was the main production and editor of the Reviews in Mineralogy, became extremely popular. Once again, it's topics that people want to read about, and another hallmark of MSA publications, it's affordable. Now, up to, I guess, last year, about 250,000 print copies have been sold of the reviews. And it's harder to figure out the usage in the electronic world, particularly since some of our electronic vendors don't really report usage. But at least for those that done, at least for the last 6 years, there's been about 2 million downloads, just over 2 million downloads of different chapters. So very well received.
That's fantastic.
We also slowly done books. The most recent book, or most popular book, is the Mineralogy book. I will point out that all the figures and animations and videos here are posted online for free. It has no mineral descriptions in there. It's all about the theory or different aspects of minerals itself. So it's a very hefty sort of book. We do have other things that the audience might be interested in. We published Jean Demuth's Care and Documentation of Mineral Collections. We also carry other publications from other societies just to make it easier for members to order them when they renew. So we have the lithography ones.
Sure.
And we have various ones from the Mineralogical Association of Canada. There's the one on Saint Hilaire. And things like the European Mineralogical Union. This most recent one, Contributions to the Mineralogy and Cultural Heritage. So basically mineralogy and basically artifacts and art objects, things like that. It's very interesting to read. We also have maybe some occasionally more popular one, the quest for shiny purple crystals.
Oh, is that the one that Monica Rakovan put together?
Yes. So
that's a great
carry it. The other is over here is that we have the Handbook of Mineralogy now. Dick Badeau and the other authors or owners at the time donated the copyright to it as well as the PDFs for it to MSA. They also sent all the print copies here as well, which we sell. But the entire Handbook of Mineralogy is online for free. If you go to the page that says open access.
Is that just for members, or
I think the handbook for anybody, everybody.
Okay, great.
It's open access. We have a page where if you click, all of the publications that are open access are listed there. Now, I think the Handbook of Mineralogy is misunderstood because Dick's idea was to have the essential description of a mineral that you could use for identification on one single page, period, and that the information was checked against original sources. So it's a handbook, but it's not really a mineralogy. For the book lovers among you, this is probably unusual. This particular volume is signed by all authors. John Anthony got passed away soon after volume 1. But anyway.
Well, Alex, maybe we can take a look at a few of the displays because we're kind of starting to run a little short on time here.
Okay, I think probably what is, as I said, people have asked me what it is I collect. And I say, well, I collect features. And I usually get a quizzical look before they back away very slowly. But I want to collect features that that illustrate something very clearly and easily. Maybe because since we're running out of time, I mean, this is not overly exciting, but this is a wonderful example of cleavage of feldspar. It's something big, people can see it, they don't have to wonder about it, that sort of thing. The other is, I guess, let's just show, this is something that often appears at Tucson. This is sort of the history of the universe in specimen form. And so we have things like the formation of the universe. So here is a specimen of hydrogen. And all the hydrogen in the universe, except for occasional ones that formed by exfoliation, formed at the beginning of the universe. So the hydrogen in the tube here is 13.8 billion years old. So it's an old specimen. The next thing for the solar system is when the gas and everything started to accumulate in this section of the galaxy that eventually formed the sun. When the sun ignited, it pretty much heated up and melted any sort of solid material that was around into sort of probably gas and melt. When the thing began to cool, the gas began to crystallize and form various types of calcium aluminum silicates. When it got a little cooler, you began to coalesce the gas into little liquid drops. The little liquid drops eventually became chondrules, or chondrite meteorites. And the high temperature calcium aluminum things became the CIA inclusions. So this is a chondrite meteorite. It's actually an observed fall in Nigeria. It fell in April 2018. It has a lot of chondrules in it. So those chondrules are about 4.6 billion years old. However, the oldest material in here is just the little very white things. These are the calcium aluminum inclusions, the things that crystallize from a gas as opposed to crystallizing from a melt like the chondrules. Now, the age of the solar system is based on the age of those CAI inclusions, or the CIAs. And so you actually end up with something that's called CIA times zero. So that's how you get the age of the solar system. Another one that sort of came from a previous MSA president, Don Valley. He worked on the Jack Hills conglomerate, and this is it here. This has the oldest Earth materials in it. The zircons here date up to 4.4 billion years. And so this caused lots of excitement when it came out. What's interesting about the zircons is based on the composition, inclusions, and isotopic composition. They evidently formed from pre-existing rocks that had seen the surface, had weathered, had seen water. So that meant that very early on in the Earth's history, you were seeing some sort of superficial processes of the Earth, basically continental crust at the very. I took this to a meeting once, and somebody had seen it, but they went to a talk where Jack Hill's conglomerate was mentioned. They mentioned in the session, there's a piece of it in the MSA booth. And right after the talk, I was just inundated by all these people coming to see it. They wanted to touch it, see it, look at it close up. So even though they were theorists and all those types, they still like to see a specimen. So
well, I think you bring up a very fascinating point. The MSA always has a booth up in the upper Galleria section of the TGMS main show, and you have these things out on display. So people new to the mineral collecting world, and especially children, they can come by and they can touch this. So it's a very tactile exhibit. And to be able to touch a piece like that, you're actually touching history. You're reaching back in time. And I think that resonates with people very, very, very strongly.
Yeah, it's being able to touch it. The other interesting things is some people go towards the old end, and some people really like the young stuff. This is from a member like Garcia, you may know, from the University of Hawaii. I had written him and asked him if he could send me a piece of lava from that eruption that started about 2018 or so. Right. So he sent me this, and of course, nice glassy top. It rolled up over ash on the bottom. This is the only one that every year I had to change the date on it. I increase it by one.
And that's Pahoehoe lava, one of the two kinds of lavas that we have growing here on the island, the other being the A'a.
Yeah. The other thing that's very interesting to people is I probably bought the last set of large Krauss glass crystal models, but not only at meetings, but also I went to the Tar Heel Gem and Mineral Club once, and the thing of my talk was, did you ever wonder why a cube, an octahedron, and a tetrahedron, and a dodecahedron, why are they all considered isometric or cubic minerals? And they had their meeting. They had refreshments then, their break for the refreshments before the talk. I thought everybody would leave. But after the refreshments, all these people sat in the front row, and they had always wondered why. Why is an octahedron considered a cubic crystal? Because generally people think about, well, you have three axes of 90 degrees equal to one another. Well, you can get that situation for a triclinic material. So pointed out it was the symmetry that made these things cubic or have a cubic or isometric symmetry. I also take these to particularly the regional GSA shows where you tend to get a lot of community college students, high school students, and homeschool students. They've read about these things, but they've actually never been able to work with a model and ask questions. And so they really do, how do you determine the symmetry, find the symmetry elements on this? And what's interesting is the most common question about a symmetry element is a center of symmetry.
Very cool. Hey, Alex, we're going to have to start bringing this to a close because we're kind of getting to the end of our time here. But I want you to talk real briefly about the student grants that you have, because I think that's an important part to what MSA is doing to encourage the studies.
Yes, we have. Krauss gave money to the society to produce. Unfortunately, he worded it very strangely, but anyway, for giving out a student grant for research in crystallography mineralogy. About the same time, some other members had donated money to the society, so they set up a pet fund. And so there are 3 grants each year. People have to apply for them. They're $5,000, so it's not a trivial sum. Mm-hmm. And then they are evaluated by the 2 different committees and then awarded. The Krauss one, I'm not sure what he really had in mind, but about 2 years ago, we had to go to the Orphans Court of D.C. in order to get it changed to open it up to allow actually students to apply for it. So very unusual.
Okay, well, Alex, I think we're only scraping the surface of what the MSA does here. I would invite all of our viewers to actually visit the website. And I think you are pretty easy to find in terms of emails. Should they reach out directly to you if they have more questions, or what is the proper process?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
I'm not sure I'm still on the website, but anyway, but that would be the easiest way to do it.
Okay. All right. Why don't you share with everyone your email address before we go to the 5 questions?
jaspeer@minsocam.org.
All right. There you have it. Terrific. Okay. So, Alex, you know how this goes because you've seen a million of these shows. I've got 5 quick-fire questions for you, 2 answers to each. All of your answers are correct. We're just going to see what the audience said and how well they know you. And then we're going to go for some Q&As. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. See that big smile? Alex is starting to sweat now. He has no idea what I'm going to ask him. Okay. Question number 1. Collecting natural or synthetic crystals?
Synthetic.
Synthetic. Okay. Question number 2. Sugar in your iced tea or no sugar in your iced tea?
Oh, sugar.
Sugar. Question number 3. Sushi or barbecue? Oh, he's thinking about that.
Sushi.
Sushi. Number 4. Bob Dylan or Lady Gaga?
Well, I don't listen to music very much, but I guess I'll go with Bob Dylan.
All right. And the final question. Truck or sports car?
Truck.
Truck. All right. Fantastic. Eloise, do we have the answers from the audience?
We do have a lot of answers from the audience, yes.
Okay. Question number 1, collecting natural or synthetic crystals. Alex chose synthetic. What did our audience say?
They thought about a natural crystal and not synthetics, surprisingly. Yeah. That surprised me as well, actually, Alex. So, yeah.
Well, see, Alex is a man of mystery, many surprises. Just when you think you know him, he's going to surprise you.
You have to remember, when I worked in industry, we grew the stuff.
There you go. Okay. Question number 2, sugar in your iced tea or no sugar? Alex chose sugar. What did the audience say?
You said sugar, Alex? I didn't hear you well. Okay.
Yes.
The audience said no sugar.
Oh, that's 2 incorrect answers.
Yeah.
Question number 3, sushi or barbecue? Alex chose sushi after a little bit of a pause.
Well, again, the wrong answer by the audience. Barbecue, 82%. So
Wow.
we have to stop in Tucson and say hi during the TGMS show to get to know you better, Alex, I think. Okay, let's carry on.
Absolutely. And for those of you going to the TGMS show, it's either in the past, it's been Alex or John Rakoven manning the booth. So don't be shy. You know him now. Go up, say, hey, you want some sushi? Question number 4, Bob Dylan or Lady Gaga? That was a tough one.
Well, yeah, it was Bob Dylan. So I think we got 97% on that one. So
okay. In golf, we'd call that a gimme. Question number 5, truck or sports car? Alex said truck.
And we got truck here as well.
Okay. So we got 2 out of 5. Not great. Had we gotten 5 out of 5, everyone watching would have gotten a free membership to the MSA. So better
I paid
luck
mine
next time.
already. It's fine. I don't need it. I paid mine for 2021. It's okay.
Woohoo! All right. What about questions and answers? Do we have some Q&As for Alex?
We had some at the very beginning. Raquel, do you want to do the Q&A?
Sure, yes. So, Alex, we have a question from Howard. He said he thinks that there was some financial support coming to the MSA from a wealthy collector, Washington Rublin, from Brookline Bridge. Can you comment on that? Seems like his collection later went to the Smithsonian.
Yes. Actually, it wasn't something I didn't cover, but I have it written in my notes there. Early on in the journal, they had a number of special issues that the universities or the authors had to pay for. There were 2 or 3 actually from Harvard. And after one of them, Charles Palachi wrote to Washington Roebling and said, gee, these are really great. It's a shame the faculty members, professors have to pay for these particular issues. It'd be really nice if you donated about $50,000. And within 3 or 4 days, Roebling sent to the society $45 $1,000 Honolulu Waterworks bonds to the society. So it was worth about $45,000. And so they had about 5%, 6% return. So it really subsidized and able to expand the journal for a couple of years. During World War II, the bonds were called, and that's when they began to have a regular sort of investment. So yes, Roebling did give what would equivalent today to be over $600,000 to the society. Now, he had been giving money to the society up to then, because if you read the letters, they would always talk to her about our friend in Trenton, and that was Washington Roebling. Now, I guess a few months after he gave the money to the society, he passed away. His son, Warren, I believe, gave the most of the collection to the Smithsonian.
Thank you, very nice. Eloise, did you ever get to see the collection when you were there? Do you remember? You are muted, sorry.
Sorry, I think I've seen some of it. Yes. I'm not sure. Sorry, Alex.
Actually, occasionally you'll see a specimen from there and will have a number, but it begins with an R.
Okay.
And actually, you have the collection from the Smithsonian. You can look at it online as well. You have a nice online catalog of the collection, so you can choose from who the mineral came from as well. So you can search by name. So it's really great. It's really well done.
Ryan, I know I'm going off the scripts too. Before on the next question, I just saw a comment from Barbara Dudroff. She wrote, MSA also has a public service award to a person or organization that elevates mineralogy to the general public. Please nominate. Alex, do you want to expand into that? I think I never heard of that, or how does it work?
Yeah, we didn't quite get to it. It's a big one on the wall there. There's a Distinguished Public Service Award. It started about 20 years ago. And let me just get the exact date here. It's given every other year, and somebody has to nominate the people. And yes, it started in 1990, and there have been 21 people. And the first person to get it was a Mineral Talks Live presenter, George Rossman.
Uh-huh.
And it's for individuals or organizations that have made important contributions to furthering the vitality of the geological sciences, particularly mineralogy, geochemistry. There are actually a number of people to be familiar who've gotten it, besides George Rossman. Marie Heising,
yep.
Joel and Ralph, Jeff Post, George Harlow. And for this year, 2021, is Denton Eberl for his work at the American Museum.
And that's the Roebling Award, correct?
No, this is Distinguished Public Service Medal.
Oh, okay. All right. That's different than the Roebling.
Yes. I would point out that SMMP should probably recruit Dennis Eberl.
If only we knew the SMMP president.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know we did it, and that's another question. So, as the audience know, Eloise is the president of the Society for Minerals Museum Professionals and the secretary. So I work for her on the SMMP. And George Harlow, in principle, any museum-related people can become a member. And we would like to ask you, Alex, because our association is very tiny. So what would you say, Elo, like 3 main tips so the association can flourish as the MSA has done over the year under your leadership?
Actually, I have 4.
Ask and ye shall receive.
Okay.
One seems rather trite and obvious, but it's members first. But there is one organization who does not put their members' interests first, but rather those running the organizations pay all attention to their own projects and research interests or resume building. Now, that doesn't seem to be true for SMP, but it's something that people tend to forget. And it also can show up in small ways. If we try to answer members' questions or just the general public's questions as soon as we can, rather than waiting, I need to do it Friday or something like that. It's particularly important in this day of electronic access because something can go wrong and people can't get on. And so as soon as we see some message like that come in, we try to respond to it right away. So rather than saying, well, gee, I have to write my paper today, so I'm going to put that off till tomorrow. So it has to be members first.
And Alex, in that regard, sometimes the response can just be something as simple as, we got your question, we're working on it. Just a touch point, basically. Let them know that you've received it and you can get the full response back to them later, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm. But being timely response is very important. Yep. And that's probably one of the important things about putting members first. Another one that I found very useful, and also for other societies that we've handled as well, is communication and transparency about operations. I put together fairly elaborate handbooks for each position, each committee, and people would say, well, gee, you don't really need to do that. You just send a few emails and that sort of thing. Yeah, it takes some time up front, but generally in the long term, it saves me a lot more time after they answer a bazillion emails. But also it gives the people, the volunteers, the confidence that they know what they need to do and how to do it. I did it for MSA, about 2 decades ago, and just kept them up. Recently, I'm the Secretary Treasurer of the MGPB division of GSA, and we're beginning the same process of having a fairly detailed handbook for each position, each committee go there. And it also does do the transparency quite well. The other thing for transparency, if a former MSA president probably would tell you, is we always had weekly telephone calls. Part was to maybe answer questions or so, but a lot of times it was just me talking about, this is what happened in the office this week. So they got a pretty good sense of exactly what MSA was doing, what it was like, what might be coming up over the horizon, that sort of thing. So that sort of constant communication is very important. The one that relates more to SSMP is I see that the mission there is basically telling others why museums are important. And you group them under educational and cultural and scientific. And you seem to be doing very well for the educational and cultural. But the science is a little bit probably more difficult. I presume this means preserving and having material available to scientific researchers, and more than just the in-house scientific researchers, but people out there. Now, in the past, I've talked to 2 or 3 of your members about better making the resources you have more available to outside researchers. And there are 3 problems of doing that. One is non-in-house researchers really do not know who has what, where. They just don't know the museum world and the people involved. The other problem came in, of course, is limited resources of many museums. I think most of your museums can handle, tens of requests coming in every month for this, that, and the other thing. And also there are restrictions on what you can loan or sacrifice. So I thought perhaps SMMP could be a clearinghouse. In other words, a sort of one-stop inquiry that could be advertised to researchers. And if you're looking for material, contact these people, and you amongst yourself know best what members or what organizations might have the material, if any, that they might use, and at least put them in contact with those. It would make it a whole lot more efficient in terms of, rather than 20 museums trying to answer one question, whereas if it came through a clearinghouse and it says, well, we know this person or this organization has that material, and just direct right to them. But I that's at least one aspect I thought is that in terms of your mission, it's tough, mainly because people on the outside just do not know all of the personnel and the organizations that might have stuff available. So the last one I have is what you do to a degree. You work with other organizations. As I mentioned for Elements, people are not joiners. They often don't pay attention to electronic notices. But if you join with other organizations, you at least get your message out there, repeated to a much wider audience. But with MSA going with Elements, we used to reach our 2,000 members, but now we reach 15,000 people. That type of thing. Anyway, that was the question, the things I thought about.
Thank you very much, Alex. It's something that we're all thinking about with the SMMP. The SMMP, we're trying to put a mission statement for the SMMP, which would be more related to museum and collections, but education-wise. And we are directly linked to the IMA, the International Mineralogical Association. So that would be more to the research part, but we're all working together. So all the museums, so there's a commission on museums at IMA that we work with. So IMA, more research related to the collection, and SMMP is more right now education and outreach to the collections, so to the museums in general. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to rearrange the position, really put a clear mission statement, as you were saying, for each of the board members, for example, and thriving back all the committees, the program and planning committees doing a great job right now with organizing a lot of, gathering a lot of information from the members. We have a great listserver. So when you're a member, you are part of this listserver. So when we have a question, it's really easy to reach every curator around the world. So like someone having a question in Vienna can reach someone in LA because they have a very specific question related to collection. So it's arriving at this point, but thank you very much for all this information, and I'm sure we will contact you back and maybe trying to do something with a bigger organization such as MSA as well. Thank you very much, Alex, for your time today. That's wonderful.
I appreciate it.
Yes, those were very insightful points. Thank you for giving some time to that question. I think clearinghouse. That's going to be a sticking one for us at SMMP. I think that's the one that stood out more for me. And sorry, Alex, if you have time for two more quick questions. One is going back to our history, or the history of MSA, sorry. So Gordon, Wary, and Trude were all members of the Philadelphia Mineralogical Society, the second oldest mineralogical society in America. Were there minutes of the PMS in the magazine in the early years?
Yes. If you look all the way up until, I think, the late 20s, there were minutes of the meetings of the Philadelphia Mineralogical Society and the New York Mineral Club. Also, at some point, they were joined by, I think, the Hoboken. Why Northern New Jersey was able to, to support a mineral society. But anyway, all the minutes of those early societies, are in the American Mineralogist from 1916 to sometime in the late 20s.
Beautiful. Thank you. And the last
and sometimes when you do Google search on something, all of a sudden it will come up as a minutes from one of those societies.
Okay.
And last one by Bob Morgan. Oh, he wanted to know for you to talk about GeoRef.
GeoRef?
Mm-hmm.
A GeoRef is actually an AGI. I would say it used to be a publication, but now it's a reference database of all the references, and it's put together by AGI. They, as sort of do an index of all geological publications. Part of it is supported by the library subscriptions to it. The other part is also if a group wants their particular interests or material in their interest indexed. I think a couple of years ago, some polar, I think it was the U.S. government wanted all the references and publications in an index of everything regarding Antarctica. They hired AGI to do the GeoRef thing. So it's in a large part, though, being replaced by just sort of being able to do Google search and things like that. But GeoRef is part of Geoscience World and acts as the index for Geoscience World.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. And I know from all of us, we truly appreciate the work you have dedicated to MSA, and wouldn't know what to do without MSA.
And finally putting a face on that person that was answering every single one of her emails. So yes, like you're saying that, Alex, that you have to answer to your members, but Alex is definitely doing it, has been doing it for years for MSA. So thank you for being so, listening to all your members. Great job on that.
Well, it changed over time. When I first got to MSA, everything was by mail. And if I got 1 or 2 letters a month, that was a lot. But now with email, you probably end up with 10 or 20 a day.
Well, Alex, I really want to thank you for coming on the show. And certainly, as Raquel so eloquently said, thank you so much for what you have done and what you continue to do for MSA, a very important organization. I invite all of our viewers to check out the website, learn more about the organization. I got a couple quick announcements I want to make. For all of our viewers out there, this Saturday is the 2021 Rochester Symposium, one of the finest series of presentations in the mineral world. That's April 17th. And you can go to the URL that we have there. That's a shortcut URL. And I think, Eloise has put that in the chat. That is this weekend. It's going to be it's all online, so you can watch it there. And I think John Rakovan is running the online part of that. So that is an incredible symposium to be a part of. Also wanted to make a quick announcement. Coming up on April 24th to May 8th is the 2021 Sinkanka Symposium. And that is, again, going to be an incredible presentation. That is a series of half-hour presentations that will go live on April 24th. They're all pre-recorded, and then you have between April 24th and May 8th to watch all of those. 2 incredible symposiums. If you want more information on things that we do here in the mineral world, those would be wonderful things to check out. I know I'm registered for both of them, so definitely take time and take a look at those. Tune in tomorrow to BlueCap Productions YouTube channel, and we are going to post our interview of episode 40, and that was our interview with Kimberly Wagner, who is the director over at the Perot Museum. That was an incredible episode, so fun, so full of just eye candy. That originally aired on March 24th, so make sure that you check that out. That goes live tomorrow, and then tune back in next week right here. We're going to have Shelley Sargent, who is the curatrix over at Somewhere in the Rainbow, on our show, and that will be the same time, 10 a.m. LA time, 1 p.m. New York time, 7 p.m. Paris time. That is our show for today. Again, a big mahalo out to Alex for spending time and educating us about MSA. Thank all of you for tuning in. Have a fantastic week. We'll see you next week. Take care.